started whenever you're ready.
And just
sorry.
ask, is
Just a
Yapa
moment.
on the phone?
I tried
Yapa?
to unmute her. I'm not sure if she can.
Yapa, can you hear? Okay.
She's
And
muted.
how about Margot Strasberg?
Whenever.
Okay, well, that's all right. Is Yapa on the phone?
I'm not sure.
Okay. That's all right. I just got an echo of my voice, but we should be okay. I'll await your
You're all set.
welcome to the last class, and thank you, Josh. Happy and Alba. We may be joined by Yapa. We may be joined by Margot Strasberg. We have here Susan. Let's not forget her. So I have on the screen here the birth of Isaac, and that's one chapter. And then we have, let me move to it, the sacrifice of Isaac. We can go back to the chapter before the sacrifice. All these chapters are in a parsha called Vayera. Even the story of Lot. Remember the wife who turns to a pillar of salt?
Yep.
A lot of things are in this parsha, but we're focusing mainly on chapter 22, sacrifice of Isaac. And then earlier, chapter 21, we'll have some things to say about. It's all about children, including Isaac's birth and the Ishmael, Hagar, Abraham, Isaac story and disputation, if you will, and the resolution of it. And then when we finish this, depending on where we're going and where you want to go, we will go to the Parsha of the week, which is Pinchas, which had a bunch of questions. But let's start with the sacrifice of Isaac. And we have Happy and we have Alba and we have Susan. So what did you all want to note about that? I was challenging you to try to see if you could come up with some alternate interpretations than the conventional ones. But we better discuss, first of all, what is the conventional story, the conventional interpretation of the story? Happy or Alba?
Is it that God was testing Abraham's faith in him
Exactly.
with the most horrible sacrifice he could think of? And Abraham passed the test.
And did not sacrifice his son, thankfully.
Right.
So this has created has traumatized you folks, me, and thousands of sages for 2,000 years. Kierkegaard wrote a whole book about it, but it's been disturbing because of a number of reasons that don't seem to go with Judaism and Judaic thought. You can probably guess what those reasons are before we invoke the sages and what they say, and before we even tell you what. There are 3 or 4 anti-Judaic principles, that would go against what Judaism is in this very parsha. That's why it seems not to make sense. What's it doing here? You've touched on some already. Go ahead. Alba and Happy. Go ahead, Happy.
This is not an original thought, but I read someplace where that it was God's way of ending human sacrifice.
I can agree with that.
Yeah, yes, it's a polemic against human sacrifice. which was common in Mesopotamian, Egyptian also, but Mesopotamian, Near Eastern cultures. We have lots of evidence. We even had a few bad kings in in Israel later on who did some sacrifices, wicked kings who were promptly upbraided for it. But it was, have found thousands of bones of children throughout the world, but certainly in the Near East and Mesopotamia. But yes, that's one of the, but what's it doing here then? We don't have we don't have a human, we don't have a sacrifice at the end. So maybe that's your point, Happy.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's one of the things you can find in the Hertz Chumash and other Chumashes. You can read, that particular interpretation. I personally have a different interpretation of this, which has nothing to do with God testing Abraham. But one of the things I was thinking about, because I really thought about these questions. They're good questions. Anyway,
okay.
What? Go ahead.
No, I was just going to have to go ahead. I just wanted, at some point, there are 2 or 3 other things that don't go with Judaism, but give your interpretation. Maybe we'll come up with it in your interpretation.
Well, first thing with baby sacrifices, I think one of the cornerstones of circumcision is precisely to turn the whole thing upside down on its head. Before, it used to be that the circumcision for boys at about 14, 15, 16, when they got married in a pagan religion or pagan society in the Middle East, was the circumcision was to activate the fertility of the boy. You cut off that piece of skin, you leave it as a kind of a down payment to the little god that, takes care of your village, whatever it may be, god of, dew or rain or snow or whatever.
Now, where is it? What kind? We're talking about Judaic circumcision?
No. What I'm saying is that circumcision has always been around. It's the interpretation that is the big,
right. It's a covenantal
enchilada.
Special thing with Judaism. Yeah. Okay, fine.
Right. Okay. So, but circumcision has always been around. And so, like in all of Mesopotamia, all of even China and Africa and other places, when you get a circumcision at maybe 16 years old, that activates the fertility, and then the boy marries the girl and they have a baby. And the first thing they do is they take the baby back to the temple and they sacrifice the baby. Well, the priests sacrifice the baby. We have here in Menorca a whole cemetery dedicated to Baal Peor, who was the one who asked for, baby sacrifices. They stuck them in urns and asphyxiated them, or they planted them underneath the fireplace, or they stuck them in the walls, or all kinds of junk like that. And so the idea of circumcision within Judaism is instead of circumcising a young man to activate his fertility and then later sacrifice the baby, let's take the baby and circumcise the baby and make a marriage between the baby and the rest of the population, the old hometown people. And so that it's a kind of a circumcision, which everybody did, but now you just turn the whole thing on its head and say, we're not going to sacrifice the baby. We're going to cut off his foreskin right now, and now this baby is not meat for sacrifices. So this thing about Isaac, who's circumcised 8 days after he was born, that's a covenant with God.
That's in the last chapter. Yes, chapter 21, right?
Right. And so there's this covenant with God. And then God says, in a kind of a weird story stuck in there, let's go have an infanticide. Let's go and sacrifice Isaac. And I think personally that Abraham was testing God, not the other way around.
Okay. How? Where's the evidence?
How is the evidence for that? Because God says, I will provide the sacrifice. And so Abraham says, okay, fine. We'll go up there. We'll do this little, charade. But if you ask me to, if you actually do not stay my hand, and I actually kill Isaac, this book is over. Last chapter, that's all she wrote. So when Abraham goes up there, it's this idea where he keeps saying, Isaac says, I see the wood, I see the stuff, I see the lots of other junk. Where's the sacrifice? And Abraham doesn't say, oh, you're it, Isaac. He says, God will provide. Don't you worry. Abraham has complete and total faith in God and believes what God has said, but he's testing God. He's playing along. Okay, we'll go up there. We'll do everything except the last part. And you're going to have to stay my hand. And God does.
Yeah, okay. I think there's some evidence in the text. I just didn't understand why the long preamble and connection with circumcision, unless you were trying to transfer sacrificial indications and circumcision to another sacrifice here.
Oh, well, what I was, because you can't take something out of its or most of the time, you can't take something out of context. Abraham left, Ur, and came wandering on down, crossed the big river, the Euphrates, and came across because he just wasn't in the mood. He wasn't circumcised, and they didn't have any kids for a really long time. And so he just wasn't buying into this, have a baby, circumcise yourself, have a baby, and then sacrifice the baby. He wasn't buying into it. So he goes somewhere and he basically, meets God or invents God or something with God. And one of the first things that happens is that God says, don't worry about it. You might be 90 million years old, but you're going to have some kids, or at least a kid or a couple of kids. And they will continue. So there's the first promise, and then the next one is circumcise Isaac and Ishmael, both of them. And they both survive. And then when God says, come on up, we're going to do what you left. We're going to do that. And Abraham is just so convinced that God is just being a little jokester, like sometimes he is or she is. So we go, all right, fine, let's go.
All right, well, you got another connection. You got a lot of multiple ideas here. You've got a connection in Ishmael calling it a sacrifice, which it normally isn't deemed. But that is a good one because he could have died when he was thrown out by Sarah, when Hagar and Ishmael were cast out. You recall that, Happy, right?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
And so that's an interesting connection of Abraham came there to their defense, and but God said, don't worry about Abraham. Don't argue with Sarah. Let her cast them out. But I'm going to take care of Ishmael. And he does, and he makes him this great leader of ultimately Ishmael. What becomes Edom, Rome. So there is no sacrifice there. So that's a nice connection. But now, right in chapter 22, in the sacrifice of Isaac, let's take your idea and see if we can find in the text, not just in our heads, because I always like to go back to the text, something that would indicate that Abraham is testing God rather than God is testing Abraham.
Mm-hmm.
What do you see anything there?
I'm reading.
Yeah, I'm sort of I'm sorting you, I'm priming you here. I asked in your question, can you find alternative interpretations? Consider verse 5 of the story. I'm on verse.
Well, it says right here in verse 8, God will see to the sheep for his burnt offering, my son. I don't think he's talking figuratively. He will see to the sheep.
Oh, okay.
Because God has never lied to Abraham, not once.
Right.
And he's always come through. I mean, the guy's a real mensch, you know, he's always come through. I'm just saying he because, you know,
So,
she, who knows, but-
okay, I can go back. I may even be able to go back to verse 5 to substantiate your point in a very huge way.
we
What
will worship and we will return.
it says, then Abraham said to his servants, you stay here with the ass. The boss and I will go up there.
Boy.
What did I
Boss.
say? The boss.
Boss.
Interesting.
Yeah.
The boy and I will go up there. We will worship and we will return to you.
He uses the pronoun we will return.
Yeah, right. And we will what?
Worship and return.
Which indicates,
There will
That
be no
Isaac knew.
sacrifice.
yeah. There may not be a sacrifice here. And there isn't a sacrifice. And that would lend evidence to do you see the argument, lend evidence to Alba's argument that Abraham was testing God, because Abraham would know all along he's going to be returning. There's going to be no sacrifice. And then Alba points to, God will provide, God will see to the sheep. Isaac, in this really almost scene of pathos, says, but Father, and he's actually supposedly 37 years old. It's a little bit ambiguous here because he wouldn't quite be talking this way if he was 37, but it sounds more like a 7, 8, 9-year-old. But that's just an ambiguity in dating and such. But Isaac says, hello, do we have somebody joining us?
Again,
Do we
Alba came back on.
Alba came back.
Oh, Alba. We don't have
He's
Margot or Yap, I guess. Yeah. So where was I? Sorry. So
Verse 5.
no, I moved beyond that. Yeah, we have the pathos of Isaac saying, Daddy, Father, but there's no, he's carrying the wood. That's pathos enough for his own sacrifice. But saying, Father, where's the animal? We have no sheep. And Abraham says, God will provide.
Yeah.
So yeah, you've turned it on its end there, and you have a way out of this, something of a way out of this dilemma. If Abraham is testing God and God isn't testing Abraham.
Yeah, I think it's that way around, that Abraham is just following along. God says he's going to provide the offering, and he's not making some kind of weird, metaphoric allusion to anything. He's just going to get it. And so you got to come and you do everything that you never wanted to do, and I'll just get you the sacrifice. We'll see.
It still seems though pretty horrific in terms of even the thought of a father sacrificing a son. Abraham is a supreme father role model to the Jewish people and to 3 religions, by the way, which number 70% of the world religions, right? He's the father of Christianity and Islam and Judaism. But so he's a supreme father, figuratively, metaphorically, and literally, supreme role model. We know we don't have sacrifice, the polemic against sacrifice that Happy suggests in Judaism. We know we don't have human sacrifice, that is, and we have sacrifice, so that, as some have suggested, why didn't Abraham say, well, I'll show my love to you by an offering of sheep or whatever, a ram?
Yeah, but that wouldn't be enough. That wouldn't be enough, because God said, I'll bring it. You don't have to. So
Right.
Abraham doesn't have to hedge his bets. He already knows that God's going to do it. And so,
well,
I'll
all
go.
right. Yeah, well, you just resolved 2,000 years of trauma.
There you go. There you
Traumatic.
go.
Good for you, Alba.
Yeah, all in a day's work.
Okay. The and the other thing, no child sacrifice. Okay, we got that.
Mm.
So, and that was very common at the time. And there are a lot of example of Judaism's radical innovations, of changes on the Near Eastern, Mesopotamian themes, on the Egyptian too. We saw that even from creation. Remember, one God instead of many gods, and a kind God, not a mean God, and a God that created a man and woman in his image. Oh, women weren't always important. We still have male chauvinism running through the Bible, but we definitely don't have any hoorays for women in Mesopotamian pagan cultures and Egyptian cultures as we do in Judaism. So yes, so this is all a way out of it. Now, there's one other way that I suggest, that this might not be about the sacrifice of children at all. This might be another issue entirely or conjointly. What was that, Alba?
I'm agreeing. I think
yeah,
there
yeah.
is, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, there's something else maybe going on here. It's and I try to get you to point to it, but this is not easy. In verses 12 and 16, and then I tell you to read the story of Abimelech and Abraham that comes just before this. And I'm going to read you one more thing that may support my argument. Happy, do you know where I was heading with this, or do you have any reaction to 12 and 16? And he said, go ahead.
No, I lost my notes. I may have, but I lost my notes. I don't.
Okay. For now I know, so twice. Here we go with repetition again. If we have repetition and that close together, we have something we want to think about. And we may have something we want to interpret. It may change or affect the meaning. So here's my verses 12. And first of all, there are only 20 verses to this whole thing. This traumatic event of all time, the most biblically traumatic event in the history of Judaism, the history of the Israelites, maybe in the history of the world, is 20 lines. And it's caused 2,000 years of hysterical, dramatic debate. All right, so picture that. And you have 12 and 16 pretty close to each other. And you have I've beaten it to death already. When there's repetition, we better beware. It says, and he said, this would be the angel of the Lord, or some say God himself, but in the person of God. Do not raise your hand against the boy or do anything to him. For now I know that you fear God, since you have not withheld your son, your favored one, from me. Aside from the fact that he has two sons, but remember, Ishmael is out of the picture. So, since you have not withheld your son, your favorite one, from me. And 16, by myself I swear, the Lord, this time the Lord declares, because you have done this and have not withheld your son, your favored one, I will bestow my blessing upon you and make your descendants as numerous as the stars and the sands on the seashore. And your descendants shall seize the gates of their foes. So he's going to have a great nation. He's going to have great, and he does, if you consider all the nations he spawns, not just little Israel, which is not as numerous as the stars and the sands. We're a small people, right? But so what might my key in red and have not let's see, I'm covered, that word is covered. And have not
Withheld.
withheld, yeah, and have not withheld your son. What is it have not withheld your son about? I don't think that's about sacrifice. I think
I
it
think
could be
it-
about, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I'd rather hear from you.
I was going, it occurred to me that you're willing to dedicate your son to me.
That's great. How does that change meaning a little bit? Not sacrificing,
But
but
yeah,
dedicating.
dedicate.
Okay, dedicating your son. And if you're dedicating to your son to me, God, what relationship do I have with that son? Happy just, Alba, did you hear? Did you hear Happy?
No, I didn't hear Happy. I was too busy.
Okay.
cursing my
She
computer.
pointed out, she was on the line of, and have not withheld your son. And I asked her what that could mean besides sacrifice. And she said, he sort of, God is saying, you dedicated your son to me. Dedication. Yafa, hi. Yafa, unmute yourself.
Looks like she is unmuted.
No, yeah, there you go. Hi, Yafa, welcome.
And can't see your face.
And we can't see you.
I heard everything, but
Okay,
Check
I'm
your screen.
glad you heard everything. I'm going to finish this thought and then ask you what you think about it. We're trying to have two alternate interpretations of the usual one on sacrifice of Isaac. We talked about one already in terms of Abraham testing God rather than God testing Abraham. And he knows all along, this is a fait accompli, nothing bad is going to happen. So there.
Rafa, tip your screen. We can only see your ceiling fan.
Yeah, you want it. If you can tip your screen more vertically, we can see you, or more towards your face. Are you able to tip your screen? All right.
who are you talking to?
You,
You,
Yapa.
Oh, okay, here I am.
Oh, there you
you
go.
are.
Okay. All right. So you heard this first alternate interpretation spearheaded by Alba, who just solved in a one fell swoop 2,000 years of agony and trauma and disputation by our sages and everyone else on this parsha and what the heck is it doing here and why is it so anti-Judaic and anti-Jewish in its very nature, you know.
But it's not.
All right. Can I just
yeah.
ask a question? Can I ask you a question? I joined in late.
Yes.
But what has that to do with Parashat Pinchas?
Nothing.
No, I sent you a homework assignment which asked you to look at sacrifice of Isaac at first. We didn't get to Pinchas yet. Okay?
Yeah.
I was trying to end the course with the most dramatically troubling parsha in the history of the world, not even in the history of the Bible and the Jews, perhaps. How can you kill your only son? All right. So we got one interpretation from Alba. Now we're on another course here, and Happy is spearheading this one. Go ahead, in your words, Happy.
About the phrase, and have not withheld your son?
Yeah, sure. Happy's looking at verse 12 and 16, Yapa, and emphasizing, and have not withheld your son, your favored son, your only son from me. And she's saying,
I'm saying that that God is saying, you have dedicated your son to me, and therefore I will bestow my blessings upon you and make your descendants as numerous as the stars in heaven.
Okay.
And to his son.
Yes, and my question, yes, and he's going to be part of the covenantal line that is eventually going to lead to the Exodus from Egypt and to the promised land. But I'm asking on this dedication idea, I like that. What if he was dedicating his son to God? What is God saying about his relationship to the son that's sort of different from every Near Eastern, Egyptian, and Mesopotamian culture of all time?
I think,
I just said he values the son.
can I say something?
Yeah.
I think that the whole story is to tell us that Judaism does not want human sacrifice. That's the whole story all about. But what bothers me about Abraham is that he argues with God about everything, the finishing storm and other issues. But when it comes to sacrifice his son, he doesn't even say a word. He just
That is bothersome. And Alba's answer is that's because it's a fait accompli with him. He knows he's testing God. He knows God isn't going to do anything bad. He knows he's not. That's one way out of. It's a clever way out of part of the. It answers your question part. Do you see that?
yeah. All right.
Yeah. But now here's a second potential answer. As a way out of this business, that calling it that God is even thinking or testing Abraham, or that even Abraham and testing God, that this thing is even about sacrifice.
Da-da-da-da.
Da-da-da. Yes,
Yeah.
Alba?
Okay, I don't even think this is about sacrifice at all. I mean, it's a good story and all that kind of stuff, and it underlines the idea that you really shouldn't, sacrifice your
plot.
kids.
You can't say it's not
It's a
about it
plot.
at all, because there's
Well, it's a plot thing.
yeah, okay.
It's a plot thing. What I think it is faith. It's having
Trust.
faith in trust that God says this is what she is going to do and is going to comply with the promises, and that's what he does.
But you have to test your faith by killing your son?
You don't have to test your faith by killing your son. You were never going to kill your son in the first place. The idea was that you believe that God was going to provide the sacrifice. It's like in the book, one second. It's like in the book Ivanhoe, at the very end where Rebecca's about to get burned or crisp at the stake for, I don't know, for whatever those guys were thinking. And she says to one of them, the thing about it is, I'm going to be saved. I have no doubt about this. And in Judaism, the only sin God cannot forgive is the lack of hope and faith in God's designs. It's the only one he's not going to accept.
Okay.
I will save, I will help you. You just have
Okay.
to have some faith in me.
I get it. So even with Abraham testing God, he has faith in God and he's doing the testing and knows how it's going to come out. Yeah, that's rather than proving his faith. He is proving his faith in that way.
Totally, completely.
But so yeah, I like that. So back to this alternative interpretation. I'm trying to squeeze out of the text, squeeze out of me, squeeze out of you, is partly in verses 12 and 16, and have not withheld your son. God has a very special relationship then with the sons, with all sons, with children. We're called the children of God over and over again in the Exodus, in the march from Egypt, in the Exodus, and so on. I mean, that's a tenet of Judaism. Children couldn't be more important.
So why does he attempt to do it? And what is about Isaac? He never talks to him again. I think Isaac is not.
That's troubling. The emotional scars.
Right. Nobody worries about it.
Yeah. And he's kind of passive and silent and never more and not very active anymore. even in his dealings with his sons. It's Rebecca who does everything. But yeah,
And supposedly he's blinded by it.
yes. So there's something terrible about Isaac here. But go back to the relationship of the importance of children and now to God. You told me could be a polemic. That's what Happy and basically Alba said. But Happy said that in the beginning, that she's read how this is a polemic, an argument against human sacrifice, which was prevalent in Egypt, Mesopotamia, and other Near Eastern cultures, basically in paganism and polytheistic religions. So, what could this also be a polemic against? Given what you would know, what do you know, even stereotypically, about Egypt, Mesopotamia, and Near East culture, and every other culture for that matter? Primitive.
They sacrifice their firstborn to God.
Yes, that often happens. And therefore, what's the relationship of fathers to children in all those other cultures?
Well, at least to the first baby, it's kind of a standoff. You know you're not going to keep that one. You're going to you've been given fertility. You swore before the God with a piece of skin that when the God gives you fertility and a baby, then you have to come back and give the baby to that particular God. And what they usually did with it was sacrifice it. I mean, like sacrifice. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Right. But there's.
Jonathan, what are you looking for?
There's a big issue here with.
What's that?
What is it with children and fathers, just normal children and fathers in these other cultures?
Usually the father's not so involved with raising their children.
That's true, and I'll even extend it to, but let me go beyond that by saying this is an issue with wives and children on the basis of the male father. Okay, they're not held in very high esteem. They're kind of property.
Okay.
Isn't that what we rail against in the male chauvinistic cultures? I mean, even the Torah is heavily male chauvinistic. It has moments of feminism, perhaps proto-feminism, but in these other cultures, there is the wife and the sons are property of the father, of the head of household, of the parent, to do what the heck he wants with them.
I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that hasn't changed at all.
Yeah, well, right. It's still got we've got some ways to go.
No.
But as our sages, Yaffa will like this, as our own sages say, ours is just to start the workings. We don't have to complete the deed. Others can complete the deed of abolishing slavery, Lincoln, of getting equal rights, Martin Luther King, of feminist giants.
It's a little bit dangerous to say it because then you don't have to get involved. You shouldn't.
Well, no, but the first half of it is we have to work. We have to work towards
we can complete the task.
And then you others, us today,
right.
We today, can complete the deed. But I just want to show you why I'm on this ownership thing. It didn't just come out of these two lines. Because I think withholding your son has to do with ownership. And that's what, and this parsha is in part a polemic against ownership and against the cultures of the day where children were property, and so were wives, by the way. And yes, and it's still that way today to some extent.
I say it's still that way completely.
Well, okay.
You know, when I watched The Handmaid's Tale, I wasn't shocked at all. I'm sitting here enjoying the acting and all that stuff, but I lived through all of that, you know, the same baloney. And you have to escape from it. I have to go halfway around the world to get away from it. But, you know, these things, even Margaret Atwood said she didn't take anything to put in her books, The Handmaid's Tale, that didn't already exist. I mean, like right now in 1984, it exists.
Well,
Hasn't
we
gone anywhere as far as I
we
can
still
tell.
haven't, I think we could say things are somewhat better, but we still haven't passed the Equal Rights Amendment for women. That would be an example. But let me just tell you, one of the things we've been trying to get at is how juxtaposition, connections of what comes before, what comes after, is important in Torah. Well, just before this story, I'll take you back, just before this story in chapter 21 comes a disputation between Abraham and Abimelech. Now, normally one says, what the heck is that there for? Get on with it. So let me look at that disputation between Abraham and Abimelech, who was a king. It says on verse 25, do you see my
Yellow.
Yes.
yellow? Then Abraham reproached Abimelech for the well of water. That also ties in, by the way, with Hagar and Ishmael, which just came before it. That's another juxtaposition. But now we're looking at a forward juxtaposition. Then Abraham reproached Abimelech for the well of water, which the servants of Abimelech, I can't read it,
Had seized it.
had seized. But Abimelech said, I do not know who did this. You did not tell me, nor have I heard of it.
Until
and then it has Abraham took sheep and oxen, and the two of them made a pact. And then in verse 30, you are to accept these 7 ewes from me as proof that I dug this well. That's Abraham, always the peaceful man, solving the problem, taking individual, personal, moral, collective responsibility. And the two of them swore an oath. This is about ownership. That's my clue that maybe the sacrifice of Isaac, and it took me a long time to figure it out, maybe the sacrifice of Isaac, because of what is joined and not joined together in Torah, our sacred text. It's no accident when things follow or join together or don't join together. So go ahead.
Wait, right. Remember, in the next, I think it comes after now, maybe in 23, 24, I'm not too sure, where Abraham makes a deal with the guy for the cave where he's going to bury Sarah.
Right.
Her,
That's it.
And
yes.
He doesn't make the same mistake twice. He says, the guy says, just between you and me, take the cave, it's okay. And Abraham says, for you, I got a special deal. No, thank you. I want to pay for it because you're you, but I don't know what your kids are going to do on down the line.
And I even want to overpay for it. I even want to be cheated.
Want to overpay, like the guy says, hey, give me a little bit. And then and Abraham says, no, take 400. I mean, how you get it? That's, that's a deal you can't refuse. And so the guy takes it. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, first of all, he wanted to be sure that he has ownership, but this type of dealing is a typical Middle Eastern deal. You say, and then you offer more. So but I think he wanted to be sure that nobody comes later on and says, this is not yours. He paid
that's true. And for all of God's promises, this is the irony, for all of God's promises to Abraham, at that point in the story, Abraham doesn't have any reason to see that God has fulfilled anything because he has no land, and that burial plot represents a huge first step. the acquisition of land
Own the land, right?
for the Jewish people. But I want to go back to one more thing, just to complete this ownership idea. I did not include it in the. I did not include it in your text, and I want to finish off by including it. There's a Haftorah portion, to every single Torah parsha.
Right.
That is a tradition, and that is often tied, it's almost always tied to the Torah. So if Jonathan Weil wants to prove his crazy idea that this text of the sacrifice of Isaac is about ownership and not primarily sacrifice, or not sacrifice alone, he has to come up with some evidence. You can't pull it out of Man in the Moon Marigolds. You have to look at the text. So I went to the text of the Haftorah, which few people do on this particular parsha, and I'm not going to read the whole thing to you. I'm just going to read a little summary to you. By the way, do you get what you understand the Haftorah is part of a Torah in effect and complements it, everybody?
I don't know.
Yes, yes,
you
yes,
heard
yes, 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 yes.
Okay, can I?
Have you heard of this Haftorah portion of this idea of Haftorah? Happy?
Yes.
No.
Oh, okay. So
May I
anyway,
say something? Every haftarah complements the text. This
I did
Why-
say that.
what?
Right. So so Jonathan Weil, if he's got any merit here, has to prove that the Haftorah has something to do with the sacredness of children and the ownership of children, and that this is being promoted here in the sacrifice of Isaac, that this is a polemic by Judaism, by God, by these writers against the practices of their time. Very revolutionary and innovative for that reason. So here's the Haftorah portion, which I didn't include for you. It says,
Is that from Kings?
no, that's the portion that goes with Pincus. This is from,
No.
this is also from Kings. Yes, I'm sorry, but it's a different Kings. It's from
Right,
the
book 2.
it's from the second book of Kings, not the first.
Right.
And it says, Elisha, like Abraham, Elisha was a great prophet. Elisha, like Abraham, embodied the nobility of Judaism for his generation. And as it does to Abraham, Scripture expresses Elisha's greatness by setting forth his compassion for others. The Haftarah cites 2 such episodes. The first involves a destitute widow who has no one to help her, and the second involves a wealthy, influential woman who needs no favors from anyone. It may be that the case of the widow, who was destitute, was chosen because of her plight. Her plight seemed to be like that of a visitor to Sodom. According to the sages, she was the widow of the prophet Obadiah, who risked his life and spent his fortune to support and shelter hundreds of prophets from the sword of the bad King Ahab and Jezebel. Yet when his widow was confronted with a creditor, oh, you know what creditors are. When the widow was confronted with a creditor who was about to seize her children as slaves in payment for her debts, she had nowhere to turn but to Elisha. Where was that? Abraham's legacy. But Elisha was there, listened, empathized, and helped. And this woman was saved. And she didn't have to sacrifice. Speaking of sacrifice, she didn't have to lose or sacrifice her children as slaves in payment for her debts. She didn't have to be confronted with creditors. So that's all about ownership. Now, the second episode involves a Shunammite woman who had everything but no children.
Mhm.
Notice this. He has everything but no children. Elisha shows his gratitude for her hospitality by blessing her with a son, as God blessed Sarah with a son. See the connection? When the child died suddenly, however, Elisha revived him by placing himself upon the lifeless little body and injecting his own soul, as it were, into the child. This has become an eternal lesson for those who wish to teach and inspire Jewish children to breathe life into them. A teacher must give himself over to his charges if he hopes to succeed. So my point is the sacredness of children and the fact that they have equal dignity, that they're not owned, unlike the cultures of the time. Now, it took a long time. We're still not done with it. And as Alba keeps pointing out, for children to have their rights as children, for wives especially to have their equal rights. But that's what I wanted to bring to your attention. And then with the most controversial and still problematic story in Judaism, but perhaps in all of literature. Any final comments on before we move to Pincus?
You know,
Which
I
is
think the part about faith and dedication, like Happy said, and stuff, we read it in Rosh Hashanah, don't we? We read the Akedah.
you read this, you read the children, yes, and you read the first part, the children part
Yeah.
and you read about the triumph of infertile women.
Yeah.
Remember,
Yeah.
three of our matriarchs, three of the four matriarchs, that's 75%, are infertile. It's better, as I often joke, to be infertile and to be a second son than to be fertile and a first son, whether woman or man, in Judaism, right? Because first sons get screwed, second sons are praised and keep the covenant line going.
No,
Just to
no.
indicate,
Hello.
wait a minute.
Yafa.
What I want to
Yeah,
say.
wait a second, because I want to get this out to Happy. So of our three matriarchs who are infertile, and then you can add Hannah, by the way, who's Samuel's, the great Samuel prophet's mother. The three infertile matriarchs are Sarah, Rebecca, and Rachel. The only fertile one is Leah, who's despised by Jacob. What were you going to say, Yapa?
But I think that this infertility that goes through this is to show how important the child is to the family. But the other thing that the first son gets screwed, whatever you said, is also to show that you become a leader of your family, not because you were born first, because you deserve it.
Yes.
You're the right person. It's not because you were born first. That's exactly goes through all the story.
Yes. It's a polemic against primogeniture and inheritance, at least in part. It isn't that way with priests and kings, though. And we'll talk about that in Pincus. With priests and kings, you still have that blood first son relationship, right? But
so the Torah wants to show that it doesn't matter just because you were born first. You have to be the right person, the right leader.
Yes, but it does matter for priesthood and kingship. But you're right.
Because in the olden days, the firstborn not only became the leader, he got, I think, 3/4 of the state. He really became.
Yeah, the first son still got a major portion of the property, and that is true.
And became the leader of his family and the tribe.
Yeah, but so the anti-primogenitor, the anti-first son doesn't pick up, doesn't stay the same. It has special status here in these covenantal relationships, these special patriarchal relationships that are going to lead us from Abraham to Isaac, forget Ishmael, to Jacob, forget Esau, to Joseph, forget blah, blah, blah. So there you go. Now, what did you want to discuss about Pincus? Pincus is about Pincus is the Torah portion of the day, yes?
Yes.
Pinchas.
Are you asking us what we want to discuss? Okay.
Yes, revolutionary, egalitarian, democratic class, isn't it?
Okay. So I have a question. Can I talk?
Yes.
Oh, okay. When Pinchas kills the head of the he
the
gets
Midianites and the
he gets awarded with like a peace prize. I don't understand. I can see you get awarded because you did something good, but why is it showing peace? He killed another person. I have a problem.
well, that
I can see if he gave him it was given a prize because he was a dedicated man. But why?
maybe he's
why peace? It's not peace.
That's a fantastic question. And yeah, fantastic ambiguity. He gets rewarded with the Nobel Peace Prize.
Right. Because
that's essentially what it is. For murdering, albeit they were horrible people, for murdering the two people who committed sex basically almost in the tabernacle, in front of the tent of meeting.
Okay, that's fine. It's fine that he did it maybe because he stopped the Magifa, the epidemic. But why didn't he get awarded a prize of dedication, justice? I don't know, but not peace. I don't know. But
there are answers to that.
Can I say something about that,
yes.
Jonathan? I was reading about what zealotry is, and it said that a true zealot has good intention. He doesn't act on anger or the desire to murder, but and that I can't now. I'm not remembering his name.
That's all right. You're doing fine.
Pinchas.
Yes.
Yeah.
That his intention was to stop what was going on, and it wasn't done out of anger, and that's why he was rewarded, because his intention was good or pure or whatever.
Right.
All right.
Yeah, that's a good answer.
And that when God rewarded him, it was because he was attesting to his good character.
Yes, although, yes, there is something somewhat ironic to follow through with Yapa. There's a message sort of in the fact that, and what would the message be? That
the Vav in the Shalom word is broken.
What?
I understand.
Verse 12.
Yeah.
Verse 12, the last word is shalom, which comes from and I'm going to confer upon you my pact of peace.
Right. Covenant of peace,
But the Shin Lamed Vav, the Vav is broken. And the music that goes with this, the Lanin, is something else. It's really spectacular.
Well, how does the cantillation, then you mean the cantillation contradicts the idea of the covenant of peace in some way?
It does. It puts it on a rocky shore.
The word shalom. Explain a little more, because at least Yapa and you understand the Hebrew.
Okay, well, the first thing is verse 12. And in verse 12, it's that whole thing about I confer upon you my path to peace.
You'll
But-
see that, you see the yellow, Yaffa, right? Verse
Yes,
12.
yes, I see it, yes.
Go
So,
ahead.
My
Oh.
covenant of peace on number 12. And unfortunately, where did you get this? Is this from Safaria?
Yeah, it's, I don't like the translation, but it's the only one
I
I
don't
could.
either.
Okay,
But the
never mind.
Vav here on number 12, verse 12, the last word, shalom, in the Sefer Torah, in most of the Chumash, except Etz Chaim. Etz Chaim doesn't do it. The Vav is split in two horizontally. It's broken like a broken staff, just like the lance that Pinchas used to skewer those two people. My God.
Oh,
that was
okay.
violent.
The-
Okay, so it doesn't show it here, but I can show it to you on my
so
photo.
what is the meaning of the bent Vav?
Broken Vav, right? There's the thing. The music that surrounds all of this is really quite spectacular, and it's up and it's down, it's this way and it's that way, and the broken Vav is like the music that we listen to, the layman that we listen to is like the soundtrack. It tells us a lot about what the people are feeling inside, so that when you sing this stuff, it puts a different level of understanding.
Okay,
So
so
when
what
you-
is the level of understanding then? That we are
The
to
level
draw
of
from?
understanding here is that Levi had the golden calf. Levi joined Simon in killing off Dinah's lovers and his whole family. Remember that little story about
Yes,
how the brothers, and who were they spearheaded by? Levi and Simon. And then Levi, he there's just all this stuff they keep doing.
but
And there gets go
but
ahead.
we're here now, so.
Right.
let's-
So what about now?
Yeah.
There seems to be a violent streak running through Levi. They're good people, but every now and again they just blow up, And
Phineas was the really from the line of which line? Son of Aaron the priest, from
son of
Eli.
Aaron. And
But
other
why
things?
are
What
we
was-
mentioning? Why
Why
are we
am I mentioning this? Why am I
Simeon?
mentioning this? Okay, there are good people out there that just seem to have moments when they just blow up. And between Moses and Aaron, there's the state and there's the church. There's the two different parts. There's the university, the doctors, the thinkers, the think tanks. And then there's Moses, who's just trying to keep it all together, on the secular level. And so Moses can't come in and kill those two people because the problem is Cosby is a princess from the Midianite group, which are all pagans, and they believe in a kind of bacchanal kind of God, and they have a lot of, sex kind of oriented rituals.
And Moses was just so you know, Moses was a Midianite. That was his
yeah.
heritage.
He was
So-
not. Can I
Well,
say
his
something?
father-in-law was, Yaffa.
Well,
Sorry, I'm just
Can
going
I say
on.
something?
it creates a conflict, Yaffa, in that-
Yeah, but I want to say something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This issue that actually Moses should have gotten involved. Why does Pinchas get involved? In-
well, the
Wait a
sages in part
Wait a
answered.
minute, and revenging. So some rabbis, some thinkers think that he couldn't have gotten involved because she was a Midianite and his wife was a Midianite. Moses' wife was a Midianite.
Right,
That's why he could not get involved himself. But
correct.
God is mad at him that he doesn't come forward and gets involved.
Yeah,
At-
well,
At this point, he punishes him not to go to the land.
well, because the answer to that is a question of Moses' leadership, which is something that needs to be discussed,
Right.
not in going away from Egypt. That's taking them out of Egypt. Brilliant. He argues with God and everything. A different man in this adaptive leadership challenge to go to the promised land, and others like Pinchas and
Joshua.
and Joshua and Caleb are going to take the lead. So, but I want to go back to saying that this covenant of peace and this covenant of perpetual priesthood, you don't necessarily have to look at that as a complete reward. What is God saying about zealotry? He
It's not
establishes a covenant of peace.
appropriate for
Correct.
the religious aspect, but Moses couldn't get involved. One, because that was a really good comment, because his wife was a different group of Midianites. But
Yeah.
Moses, that's not his venue. The Cosby and Zimri were doing something, a pagan ritual, and they were both representatives of a rather high up kind of social class.
So
And
why wasn't it his job? He
Yeah, he
gets
could-
involved. Wait a minute. He gets involved before when he sees an Israelite, an Egyptian kills an Israelite,
Yeah.
kills him. He
No,
gets
it's a fair question. The Midianite answer is one answer. Change in leadership and personality, adaptive, not adapting, is also partly true. But there's an attitude of Judaism and God towards zealotry that has to be dealt with here.
Well, okay,
And
Moses, like Yaffa says, Moses kills the Egyptian guy for smacking down one of the Israelite, workers and stuff. But he runs away after that. He's a prince of Egypt.
Yeah, he commits
doesn't-
murder. He commits murder. He's scared.
But he's a prince of Egypt. He could have committed whatever he wanted to, but he didn't feel like that. For
And you
whatever
also, for
reason.
the Prince of Egypt, you didn't have to get involved either.
Yeah,
That's exactly right. He shouldn't have gotten involved, but he did.
Yeah,
and then he runs away.
Yeah, but he's heroic there. Yeah. Now look at this. What is I'm trying to get at what is the answer? What is the attitude of God and Judaism towards zealotry? What would you expect it to be?
Towards what?
Is
Zealotry.
Oh,
zealotry,
oh, okay.
zeal, zealotry.
Yes,
What do
yes.
we think about that in Judaism? Is it 100% for it, 100% against it, or Metz and Metz?
Well, I think it's a good zealotry and it's a good bad one. If you're zealous for a good cause, that I want to help you elevate yourself for this. But if it's jealousy for killing and all this anger, I don't think it's a good one.
I think there's a difference between zealotry and persistence. A person can be persistent in something without being zealous, even though they're never going to sway from their path.
How
they can
come?
be persistent.
Yeah, how come Pinchas is rewarded and Elijah is upbraided in the complementary Haftorah portion? You read Elijah here. Why are you here, Elijah? He replied, I am moved by zeal. For the Israelites have forsaken your covenant, torn down your altars, and put your prophets to the sword. I alone am left, but the Lord, come out, he called, and stand on the mountain before the Lord. And lo, the Lord, help me here.
Passed by.
Passed by, there was a great and mighty wind, splitting mountains and shattering rocks.
By the power of the Lord.
But the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind, an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake.
Was not in the earthquake.
And after the earthquake, fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, a still small voice. He is not only upbraided by God, he loses his prophecy. He is thrown out of his prophecy role. It's given to Elisha. This couldn't be more condemnation, couldn't be more strong than what was done to Elijah here, a great prophet. Look at verse 16. And he had to anoint Elisha, a son of blah, 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 to become, to succeed you to succeed
King.
succeed Elijah as prophet. So what's the attitude towards zealotry? There seems to be a contradiction between.
I don't see the contradiction. I
Well,
think that because Elijah here tells him his motive. Pinchas didn't talk to anybody about his motive. He just grabbed the lance and killed
but
him.
what's wrong with Elijah's motive? That they were terrible people. This was the Ahab gang who killed
but he's
every prophet.
thinking about it. It's like it's like the story of Jonah. Jonah is told he has to go to Nineveh to do whatever. And he runs off this way and that way and every other direction, but the one he's supposed to go in. He goes there and finally he's still questioning. He's like this guy in crisis, you know. He's still questioning, why do I have to go to Nineveh and save a bunch of people I don't even like? And when he comes back, the tree that he plants, that vine that he plants, you know, that grows overnight, gives shade to Jonah. And then it dies. The tree, the vine dies, and Jonah's, you know, once again bitching, moaning, and groaning. And God says, yeah, go ahead.
Go back to Elijah and Pinchas.
Okay.
It still seems
Right. Elijah,
still seems strange.
Pinchas has a zeal which is absolutely out of control. He just does it. He goes over the top without going in between any of the steps between. But Elijah's explaining why he's doing it, and it's a bad answer.
Why?
Because
Why?
didn't he go and hide? And didn't that show that he didn't trust God? That he was afraid?
That
he would-
he hid primarily because Jezebel. So
Okay.
Jezebel, the bad wife of Ahab, was after him, and he hid in a cave. And then he came. God called him out. God calls him to task for acts that many great prophets have committed here. There seems to be an inconsistency, and if you focus, it's beautiful poetry. But the Lord was not in the earthquake. But the Lord was not in the wind. But the Lord was not in the hurricane. And the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, a still small voice, one of the most famous passages in all of the Bible, in all of literature. You've heard about wandering in the desert or searching for a still small voice. Maybe we're all doing that. Beautiful poetry. What's going on here with the attitude towards zealotry? I think we have to delve a little deeper. Let me see if I can help here.
What?
With some other Torah, some other Haftorah, and some other Jewish history, and perhaps some other Talmud. Here is something from here's what Pinchas brings forth to me as a troubling parsha, and his actions, and in contrast with Elijah's. Righteousness and zealotry in Judaism. This is a midrash. Midrash is like stories that were written started around the 2nd century Common Era, on just like we're doing now. We're doing a midrash, if I dare say, on a dialogue between God and Elijah. Here's how these great sages wanted to explain it. Don't read the subhead there yet. I'm giving you the answer. Elijah, the Israelites have broken God's covenant. God, is it then your covenant, Elijah? Elijah, they have torn down your altars. God, but were they your altars, Elijah? Elijah, they have put your prophets to the sword. God, but you are alive. Elijah, I alone am left. God, instead of hurling accusations against Israel, Elijah, should you not have pleaded their cause?
Mm.
Song of Songs, Rabbah 1:6. This is a midrashic dialogue. So let's keep going. Judaism's, I'm trying to be fair here, Judaism's case for and against zealotry. So I conclude there's something about God. What now? Was Pinchas more a defender and not an accuser? Maybe. But Pinchas, as you'll see, it does not get away with this either. In fact, making him a man of peace is not exactly the thing you want to be after being a zealot.
That's exactly what I said. Yes.
Yeah.
Of all the things, it's upsetting.
No, but you said, why does he get rewarded? Right. And I'm saying,
No,
yes,
I
you're
said, why
right.
does he get awarded with peace? Of
Yes,
all-
it's not necessarily, and I'm saying as you, it's not necessary. I'm going further. It's not necessarily a reward. Here, let's go further. Here's the case for
but
zealotry.
Mohammed, maybe we should have just taken him out and like judged him in front of all the people, so people will learn a lesson from it and all this, rather than just.
That's the problem. That there wasn't any trial. Judaism believes in trials, in fair judgments, in thought. That's the problem with zealotry.
Right.
Pinchas is not totally off the hook here. So here's a case for zealotry. I'm prejudiced here because I don't believe in it, and I'm going to tell you a story about zealotry in a minute that affected me personally. Here's the case for zealotry. Maccabees against the Greeks in the war we commemorate on Hanukkah. Great story. Maccabees took it to themselves and victory. Psalm 106 in praise of Pinchas. They yoked themselves to the Baal of Peor. That's the king of the god of the Canaanites, and ate sacrifices offered to lifeless gods. They
Aroused
the Lord's anger by their wicked deeds, and a plague broke out among them. But Pinchas
stood out
and intervened, and the plague was checked. This was credit to him as great righteousness
for
Endless
endless
for what?
for endless generations to
For
come.
endless generations to come. Okay.
But in the end, the Levites, they don't get land. They have to live in cities. They can only live off of the job they have in the temple. It's kind of nice that you get to skewer a couple of people and stop a plague, but that's not peace.
I'm not sure.
The reason they're not given land is because their job was to teach. They were the rabbis and the teachers. So they were given cities to live there.
Let's look. Go ahead.
And then piece of land, just to grow little things, and the rest they got this.
Listen, let's not be completely unfair to him. He stopped the plague, which had already killed 24,000 people, and he stopped God from potentially knocking off everybody. God wanted to destroy the children of Israel for the third time. They never would have gotten to the promised land. They never would have been on their journey, right? So let's take the context correct here. Okay, here's a case against zealotry in Jewish history, in Torah, in Haftorah, and in Talmud. I'll just put together some things. It's all right if you don't know the history. Assassination of Gedaliah, appointed by the Babylonians as governor of Judea after destruction of First Temple, resulted in most Jews still in Judea forced to flee to Egypt, devastating Jewish life in the Holy Land, potentially with long-term effects. 2, Masada is highly regarded. The heroes, the zealots, where this took place against the Romans. But here's another take on it. Jewish zealots against the Romans in late Second Temple times, first century Common Era, failure to listen to Yohanan ben Zakkai. Zakkai was a moderate. He wanted to try to get peace with the Romans so as not to have the whole culture destroyed. Here, I'm going to modern times. Assassination of Yitzhak Rabin by Zealot Yigal Amir. He was a devout Jew, a zealot, a fundamentalist, an ultra conservative. I think it's fair to call him a zealot. What did he do to the peace process? You can come down on one side or the other. Now, number 4, there's a parsha break in chapter 25 between Balak and Pinhas at the most counterintuitive point. It's fascinating, and it's destroyed by most translators, unfortunately.
And the music's fantastic.
Yeah.
Right there.
In the act, in 25, it's the act where he stabs the Midianite princess. These are major people, as Alba has pointed out. And he stabs the head, Zimri, the head of the chieftain of his tribe. And then comes God's divine verdict. Okay, Pinchas, I thank you. You kept me from destroying the Jews. You acted zealously on my behalf, but I'm making you're out of the picture now. Not really, but half out of the picture. I'm making you a prince of peace, and I'm giving you perpetual priesthood. Yafa, question?
Yes, my question is, it's sort of said, why didn't God stop the Magifa, the epidemic? He waited for him to intervene. Why is he so angry that he needed one person to divert this? What if
it be because he wants us, because we have to mature and have responsibility and figure out how to be growing up and get to the promised land is one answer. We have free will, even though God can do anything he wants. All right, so God makes Pinhas a man of peace. Then 6, the prophet Elijah, Torah portion, we just saw it. Elijah, it couldn't be worse for Elijah. He's not only upbraided, forget it. You appoint a new prophet. You're out of here, Elijah. That's pretty severe. And 7, this is a good one. Pinhas's act known as here's the answer that some of you are grappling with. Pinhas's act is known as a one and only case of halacha be'ain morin ken. Would you give me the correct Hebrew on that pronunciation, Yafa and Alba?
Ken. It's halacha, but you really don't teach it like this.
Well, say the words properly.
Halacha. It's a case of halacha, means it's the law.
Yes.
Ein morin ken, but they don't say that it's correct. Ken, that it should be taught.
Okay, yeah. So here's the bit.
It cannot be justified.
So here's an evaluation of zealotry. This is what it ends up with after pages and pages and pages, and the argument goes on. I had to cut it off with a quick number 7. A law which should not be taught and that can be justified. What Pinhas did should not be taught. We shouldn't be zealots. It can be justified only once, only in retrospect, only when it produces the desired results. It did, but these are the qualifications. So I thank you. I'm giving you a man of peace reward, a perpetual priesthood, but we can't be doing this. Right. Why? Because you take the law into your own hands. Exactly. You become a suicide in the name of God. That means I can be a suicide bomber. That means I can kill Yitzhak Rabin. That means I can murder my wife. See what
What-
the problem with zealotry is?
Mhm.
It's a problem. It's an endless problem. And
And
if there is, after all this consternation, it ends with halacha vin morin ken. Yeah, yeah, okay, we're not going to teach this. We're drop it, drop the subject. So it's very ambiguous, but it's really quite beautiful. Okay, do you?
have other
I
questions.
want to show you. Well, I want to go by you. What other? So that's zealotry. What other questions? I forget what question we started with. I think it was Happy's.
Let's talk about the Bnot Slofchad, the Slofchad daughters.
Oh, the daughters. Okay, good. Let's
Yeah.
go to the daughters. That's a great one. That's chapter 27. These are all the census.
Well, they go into details, yeah.
Great detail. Okay, so give me the I'm going to call them the daughters of Z. You'll forgive me, but give me the correct pronunciation, Yafa and Naba.
Machla, Noah, Chogla, Milka, Vetirza.
So how do I say the word if I'm reading English? The daughters of
Bnot Slofchat. Oh, the guy, Slofchat.
Slofhat. So
Slofhat.
I kind of, yeah, that's why I prefer,
Like a
I
T,
prefer,
like
I
a T
prefer
test.
the,
It's a tz.
yeah, I prefer the spelling TZ. You're right. The
Yes.
daughters of
Slofchat.
Slofhat
Yes.
of Masonite family, son of Heifer, son of da 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 da. They make a plea to Moses, these daughters, that listen, our father died. He left no sons. Don't we get a stake? This is revolutionary, folks. This
Right.
is the Bible.
It-
4,000, 3,000 minimum, probably 4,000 years ago, making a proto-feminist statement.
They're the first laborers. Okay. But I want to say something.
Yes, go ahead, Yaka.
Actually, no. Actually, what they are demanding is right, but the law was also right. Why? Because in those days, let's say I belong to the tribe of Shimon, right? And I'm
Right.
a woman, and I'm marrying somebody from the tribe of Yehuda. You know what happens? I move to the tribe, so so my land is neglected. Nobody will have the land. That was
You're
the law.
going,
So
you're
what?
going
So what? No. So this was the law. So what God says to him, yes, they're right, but there's a condition. They can get the land only if they marry a cousin from the tribe. In other words, they are not leaving the land. That's the whole thing.
yes. This is why, this is the argument for and against feminism, biblical feminism, proto-feminism. The biggest argument is the one you raised before anyway, Yapa, that is if there's a son, the daughters are screwed. The son gets it all. The first son even gets more than the second son. So let's not get carried away and say
but
Judaism. Wait a second.
Now they're going to get under condition that they marry somebody from the tribe.
Yes, I'm going to get to that. There are three reasons I don't think this is a feminist this is a feminist, a completely a polemic against male chauvinism. One, the son's still the principal person. Two, well, there are really two. Yafa's point that they have to marry somebody within their tribe. And you can see the practical and political reasons why. If they marry outside of their tribe, then the tribe has lost its properties and its land and its belongings. See that, Happy?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. So yes. So, and that's not resolved, by the way, till chapter 36 in Numbers. in other words, sort of in this ruling by God, a fair ruling, inheritance of the daughters of Slophad is granted. But God forgot one thing, and it wasn't given until 9 chapters later. It says, you got it. You can't intermarry. And so
Okay.
it's like we forget that until 9 chapters later. Alba, are you there? Or did you get scared away by my zealotry?
Me?
No, Alba.
Oh,
Alba's, by the way, Alba's from Valencia, Yapa. So she may be having trouble with her computer, or I may have been screaming too much. My wife had to leave the room because I'm so excited. I'm zealous. I'm zealous about
You're jealous of the daughters of Tophat.
I'm zealous about Torah.
You're jealous for them.
Yes, but I want to give the lie to this business.
Can I make one more comment? It's very important.
Yes.
This question and one more question. It's the second Pesach that Moses does not know the answer and he asks God. So yeah.
I don't think that's necessarily bad leadership. I think that's
no. I'm just saying it must have been such an important issue. He did not.
Yes. Great. You're right. And it is tremendously innovative and revolutionary.
Right. That's why
I have
did not know the answer and he asked God.
Wait a second. Yeah. Yes.
The other one is the Pesach. You know the Pesach, that people who are sick and Pesach comes, they had to get out of the camp. In those days, if you were sick, you went out of the camp.
Yes, so right.
You can celebrate a Pesach.
Right.
So the law is that you can celebrate a month later with the symbolic thing. So if somebody's in China and he can't celebrate Pesach, when he comes back a month later. But the point is that these are the only questions that Moses is absolutely stunned. He doesn't know the answer.
Yeah. Isn't there another question at one point or a couple of other times, but well, whatever. But the big thing here is that it is tremendously revolutionary and innovative on the part of Jews. We're talking 4,000 years ago, folks, in the time of total property owned, wives and sons in Egypt, Near Eastern, Mesopotamian cultures. Incredibly forward-looking. But let's not get carried away. The Jews still have slavery. The Jews have slaves. The Hebrews have slaves. One, the son still gets the stuff and continues to get the rewards. And they may be able to get to inherit the daughters of Z, but they can't marry outside the tribe. So,
Jonathan,
so those
Jonathan, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
When you say that the son's got the property, does that mean land or does it mean everything?
That means land and money and everything. Of course, mostly everything was in the land, but yeah, they inherited the sons. The daughters got nothing. The daughters are not part of the census. The daughters are not part of the sacrifice. I don't even think Yaffa checked me on this. I don't think the daughters even engage in teruma, in the contributions towards the Mishkan. It's all the men.
No, they're not.
Yeah, there you go.
They have to take care of the children.
Yeah. So, and the children and women are not counted. So I don't like this passage being taken out of context by feminists. And wow, it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. It's still, don't forget male chauvinism in the Bible. I mean, and understandably, the culture of its time, but don't get carried.
Hello, because the mitzvot, shehazman graman, the mitzvot that are bound by time. Let's say if you get up in the morning,
Right.
7 o'clock, and you have to put tefillin, and then your baby's crying, but you have to put tefillin as you get up. So there are mitzvot that women cannot do it because of their obligations. So that's how it became uneven. Whatever.
Yeah, I like that. I can even give more dramatic examples. We don't stone people to death for adultery. We don't view, although some do, homosexuality as an immoral, God-forsaken abomination. So there's a long way to go there, right? But so the Torah is of its time. Can we change? I think you can justify new interpretations and new inclusions in Torah because we're doing all this midrash. We're adding stories and commentary all the time. So why can't we add commentary on different attitudes towards daughters?
Midrash, you can.
Yeah, we're doing, if we think about it, I'm not saying our class is that wonderful, but we're doing midrash here and creating more stories. All right, this is the most fascinating thing to me. It bothers me to no end. This is Moses saying, "May the Lord, God of the spirits of all flesh, appoint a man over his community, who shall go out before them and come in before them, and who shall lead them out and bring them in, so that the Lord's community may not be like sheep that have no shepherd, who shall go out before them and come in before them, 1. 2, who shall lead them out and bring them in." Mostly everybody interprets it as a redundancy. There is no accidental repetition in Torah. It's got purposeful pattern. It's not a redundancy. There are 2 different meanings there. This is the most difficult question, though, I'll probably ask you today. It's not easy. What's going on here? What might the 2 different meanings be? We're talking about God asking the Lord, Moses asking the Lord to appoint a successor who's going to be Joshua. And here are his characteristics, his qualifications. And here's a redundancy, which is not a redundancy. Well, take the first one first. So this is a quality of leadership. What does that mean? To be a great leader, you shall go out before the people and come in before them. Why is that great leadership?
You go out, you set an example.
Yes, and look, pretending you're doing battle, right?
Right.
You don't stay behind the scenes,
right,
like General MacArthur, who I can't stand, who's a propaganda machine, but never mind. Who shall go out before them and come in before them? You take the lead. King David was praised by all his subjects, all of Israel, because he was out there fighting with them, and he came in before them. They followed him in. Now, what's the second part? Who shall lead them out and
they will not be like sheep.
Bring them in. And by the way, that sheep shepherd thing is nice because that's how Moses started. At the burning bush, Moses was a shepherd. And so it's a nice little comparison here.
Always, a leader is always compared to a shepherd, because a shepherd has to watch.
Yeah, shepherds taking care of their sheep. It's a common metaphor.
From all sides. Yes.
The Lord is my shepherd.
Right.
We shall not want. So what else is going on here? it seems repetitive. It's a toughie. Who shall lead them out and bring them in?
Yeah. In other words, take them to war, bring them back in peace. Be the leader. Set an example.
I think there's something very interesting going on here. Let me go here. I'm putting it in the context of what's happened. A few parsha before, we had the incident of the spies. We didn't read it here. It was just before our class. But the idea was that Moses sent people out maybe too soon.
Maybe too soon, and maybe the wrong people.
Yeah, that too. Although they were pretty big. They were big. They were captains. They were big shots.
Right. So everybody believed what they said.
Yeah. So.
And by the way, why did he send women? Would have been different reports.
If he had sent women, yeah, sure, different report. You're right. Women make better spies. So here's my question, which may help us with that second part of what seems a redundancy. Whether it does or it doesn't, this seems to be a major part of leadership. Think about it. So I took some of the great leaders for me, you can debate. Were Lincoln, I took the Kennedys off the list here, by the way, which I should not have. I really wanted John F. Kennedy and Robert Kennedy there too. But I can't make as dramatic a point.
Okay.
I can't make the dramatic point I'm trying to make here. Were Lincoln, Gandhi, Martin Luther King, Anwar Sadat, and Yitzhak Rabin too far out in front, ahead of their time? Heroes today, they are heroes today in many people's minds, are often regarded as traitors, betrayers in their day. Why are they regarded as traitors or betrayers? Look at what these men were trying to accomplish in their day, and they were of their time.
They were trying to change the order. They were trying to change established norms.
Right, the natural order of things. Or put even more forcefully, they were trying to turn enemies into friends.
Yeah.
Right? Because Lincoln was trying to trying to get the South to go along with the North to go along with the South. Basically, blacks, African Americans were enemies. Lincoln said, we're not going to have them as enemies. Gandhi said, we're not going to have the Muslims and others as enemies.
Right.
We're not going to have minorities as enemies. Martin Luther King, again, the battle's still being fought. And from Lincoln, I'm sorry, we're not going to have African Americans. We're going to judge people by the content of their character, not the color of their skin. Have I got that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Anwar Sadat, okay, and Yitzhak Rabin, a second away maybe, inches away from possible peace. Sadat trying to convince the Egyptians to go along, basically the Palestinians, basically the Arabs to go along. Rabin killed by a devout fundamentalist, I'm being nice to him, assassin who, and Orthodox Jews were very worried, not just fundamentalist Jews. What is Rabin doing? He's way out in front of us. Who? Sadat was assassinated too. Yeah, that's why he's here. All of these men were assassinated, trying to change established norms. Whatever you think of them in your mind. Yapa, you still with us?
Yes.
Yeah. So you can have different opinions about these people. That's fine. But look at the idea of pacing and timing. One of my favorite contemporary thinkers and greatest rabbis, Jonathan Sachs, who just died, had meetings with Yitzhak Rabin shortly before he died, along with others, not opposing his views, but saying, gee, we're so far out in front, we don't have the people behind us. There's a case of pacing and timing. Can we go a little slower, Yitzhak? Or do we have to go like this? Now back into Torah, here's what the people did on the lesson of the spies. After the spies came back with their negative report and the Israelites said, oh, we agree with the 10 bad spies, not the 2 that said we could conquer the land of the promised land. After that, they got, there was a plague in which, am I right, Yaffa? There was a plague in which thousands were killed.
Yes.
After the spies came back, yeah, and it had to be stopped. But the Israelites' impulsivity and absence of pace. Look here. Here's what's being said. This is from Torah. Early the next morning, the people began climbing. This is after they rejected. They accepted the spies' report and rejected going to the promised land. And forget it, Moses, we're not going to do it. In fact, we wouldn't mind going back to Egypt, you idiot. So early the next morning, the people began climbing towards the top of the, what does that say?
Top of the hill.
Top of the hill, declaring, we are now ready, Moses. We shall go forwards to the place that God has described, the promised land. We admit that we were mistaken. Oh, we're sorry.
But
Why are you going?
It's only a group of people that did it, not too many. Yes.
Yeah. It's a pretty large group, though, isn't it? Well, it's not as many as could climb a mountain. Okay. Why are you not going against God's word? Said Moses. It will not work. Do not proceed. God is not with you. Do not be killed by your enemies. But the people, some people, as Jaffa points out, defiantly climbed towards the top of the hill, though neither the ark of God's covenant nor Moses moved from the camp. The Amalekites and Canaanites who lived in that hill country came down and defeated the Israelites, pursuing them with crushing force all the way to Hormah. So when you're leading a group, you have to make sure you're ready, they're ready, think what you're doing, remember pace. And
all right.
Yeah, remember the pace you have to take up. And I think that second part is really about pace and not getting too far out in front of things. Any questions on that?
Can I just make a remark? I think that basically the Israelites didn't want to go to the land because in a way it was very comfortable in the desert. They didn't have to work, they got manna, they get this. Basically, I think they were scared, but they really didn't want to go. I think that's why they failed.
And you support my view that that's very critical, that's why they didn't get into the promised land in Torah. That is precisely why.
Right.
That is somehow ignored pretty much because we do get there in Joshua, but we don't get there in Torah. That's our sacred text. That's what we read over and over again. Maybe we'll get closer to the promised land the next time. But yeah, we weren't ready. Freedom is freedom. They want to go back to Egypt.
Right.
Slavery is easier than freedom.
Excellent.
Especially freedom with responsibility.
Right.
Here's a little thing I wrote up see if I can find it. There's a continual juxtaposition. I think what Yapa is saying. There's a is Alba there? God, I must have lost her forever or scared her away. There's a continual juxtaposition of narrative and law and the tension between freedom and order throughout the book of Numbers.
Right.
Laws are necessary for order and are often needed to restore order. Pincus did that kind of law that was off the books, so a little bit questionable. But after the horrendous and flagrant disobedience that occurs throughout the book of Numbers repeatedly, including in the recent Hi Abba, did you hear all Yafa's and Happy's pearls of wisdom? Or did you miss?
Bless my ears and whiskers. No, and I wish I had. Now I had to, turn the
All
whole
right.
damn thing off and turn it
I
all
know
back on.
you're amazing. It's amazing that she's checking in from 3,000 miles away in Valencia. Okay.
Yeah,
So-
but it's-
So here's my little thing about law and narrative. So it's interspersed continually in Numbers, which people say is a mishmash. To me, it's logical. In Parsha Pinhas, it's only Pinhas's act of zeal, not Moses's. That's what Yapa is asking about. Why not Moses? That restores order of an out of control situation where the Israelites are openly guilty of the dual sins of adultery or sexual lasciviousness and idolatry. Complete chaos has almost prevailed. This is a big deal, taking us back to a pre-Noahide world where God had to destroy everybody by flood and begin anew. That's what almost happened. That's why Mr. Pinhas deserves some praise. But laws are also necessary to achieve freedom with responsibility, the newfound and new kind of freedom that the Israelites will desperately need and require on their entrance into the promised land. That's what this is about. It's so hard. It's so hard to journey. Look at this. Look at how hard it is even for Moses. Well, here's the juxtaposition of narrative and law. I did it over 36 chapters. Chapters 1 to 4 are narrative, 5 to 6 law, 7 narrative. Narrative is the storyline moving forward, right? There's no example where it isn't interspersed. That isn't chaos to me. That's a purposeful pattern to Numbers. Why? Because it's very tough. They're not going away from Egypt. That was easier. They're not going out of, they're not going from, they're going to. How can we get to the promised land if we don't have responsibility? If we don't have freedom.
Out of them. But
What's that?
for your closing, there's one topic we didn't discuss. We can discuss it forever. I still say it's not fair that Moses did not go to the promised land.
Yes. Okay. All right. I'll buy that. We can discuss that forever. Do we simply say we need new leaders for a new time? I'll speak to it here because, but I'll partly defend your
Okay,
comment. Here's possibly why. Moses is a great leader, no question. He's the humblest
Of all people.
The humblest man that ever lived.
And he sacrificed his life. He left his children, his wife.
Yeah, yes. He gets upbraided because he's not properly attending, right, even in sexual relations to Zipporah. Right. He puts himself outside of the tent for the sake of the people. And Miriam and Aaron upbraid him a lot, little Lashon Hara. There are yentas there, and whether he's wrong or right, they're yentas, and Miriam gets leprosy. But he doesn't answer their charges, their yentism with, you're terrible people. He saves Miriam. Basically, she only gets a week or two of leprosy, and then she's going to be okay. He prays for Miriam. Now, going back to Exodus, taking them out of Egypt, Yaffa's right. He argues again and again and again with God. Only Abraham once argued with God and dared to argue with God over Zipporah. Over Sodom and Gomorrah. That, you know, if there's one righteous man there, 10 righteous people, how can you possibly destroy all of Sodom and Gomorrah? But Moses goes a step beyond. When he comes down and sees the golden calf, he tells God, basically, you know, you're out of order. I was gone 40 days. Moses is angry, but after that,
He drops it.
yeah, he smashes the tablets, but he says to God, listen, I'm out of here, and I'm not leading anybody away from Egypt. I'm not going to be part of this unless you get down to earth with the people. There's a great line from one of my favorite plays, Inherit the Wind. Do you know Inherit the Wind, which is about the Scopes trial? Yeah. No, my favorite line is the last line, one of the last lines is Clarence Darrow, who is Henry Drummond, defending the right to free thinking and believing in evolution, is asked, so what do you think of William Jennings Bryan, who's played by Frederick March, and whose name is, what is his name in the Inherit the Wind? Not William Jennings Bryan, but I'll think of it in a minute. Okay. But in any case, Clarence Darrow and Frederick March are opposed. William Jennings Bryan and Clarence Darrow are on opposite sides of this. William Jennings Bryan is very evangelical. He was in real life. He's a zealot. This is zealotry. He believes literally in what the Bible says, and to a large extent, you know, it destroys him. But the last line, Clarence Darrow doesn't put him down. He says of William Jennings Bryan, he was a good man. He was a good man. He just looked for God too high up and too far away. Isn't that beautiful?
Yeah.
And he looked for God. That's zealotry. He looked for God too high up and too far away. And
probably all do
he
that.
was a good man. And the film is great. It ends where Clarence Darrow leaves the courtroom, Henry Drummond, Spencer Tracy, who I adore, and he's holding both books, not Torah, well, the Bible, the complete Bible, and the Origin of Species and Descent of Man by Darwin. And he's weighing them like the scales of justice. You remember this ending? And he puts both together and he walks out of the courtroom, and that's the end of the movie. So that's a little thing about zealotry. Let me before I go back to Moses and Yaffa's question, let me tell you about my story about zealotry, which hurt me deeply and still hurts me a bit. I was asked to present on, let's see, what's a holiday? Sukkot.
Presidents.
No, Sukkot, which celebrates the giving at Mount Sinai of the Torah, the handing down.
Shavuot?
I'm sorry, not Sukkot. Shavuos. Yeah, Shavuos. Yeah, I was asked at Shavuos, which is based on staying up all night and discussing and debating the Torah and whatever else you want. And it was 10 o'clock at night by now, but I was asked by a synagogue, which shall be nameless, and a rabbi that shall be nameless.
Okay.
And a halakhic police person that shall be nameless, I was asked to make a presentation, and it's a great honor. There are only 5 other people that made one. But anybody could have made one, by the way. This is egalitarianism in Judaism. I wasn't really chosen. I volunteered. We have to put this, and this is what Judaism believes in. You're not chosen. You volunteer. So 5 people volunteered, or 6. I was one of them. So I'm kind of nervous because it's my first presentation in public. This is about 4 years ago. And the room is crowded. It's before COVID. There are 40 or 50 people there. And the rabbi's there. And somebody who I know is sitting next to the rabbi and talking to him here and there. And I, being the paranoid person I am, say, oh, they're talking about me and they're putting me down. Yeah. Why is this? I'm not using any names. Yeah. And so, so what happens? So the rabbi, I'm like 5 minutes away from giving my presentation. The rabbi gets up and, by the way, I'm holding a pen and I'm writing a few notes.
Uh-oh.
That's the important part. That's a breaking of the law and the laws of Shabbos, which are in effect. Then you don't use, you don't write, you don't work, you don't use utensils. Okay. So I'm wrong, but the rabbi gets up and he whispers to me, put the pen down. Then he goes and he's seated back. So here's what bugs me. In the room are not only several people with pens, using them or not using them. You're not even supposed to have them on you, visible, certainly. But there are people with cell phones. In fact, one professor who I greatly admire, the cell phone rings. Most of you know that this professor, he's very famous. The cell phone rings. And I'm saying, and I'm the one, would this rabbi have upbraided the professor with a cell phone, the famous man? Does he just upbraid Jonathan Weil because the halakhic police person?
There were also the people there texting.
Yeah, there were people texting on their phones, okay?
So
So anyway, so that's I'm making a long story, I mean, a short story too long. But I was embarrassed and humiliated.
I don't blame you.
I gave a good presentation.
Wait a minute. I thought you whispered. Everybody heard.
Everybody heard out. What?
I thought he whispered, so people heard.
No, not people didn't hear. But I still felt a little shaken. I'm going on in 5 minutes, and I take criticisms pretty badly. I took it to heart, and yeah, I think I was most, to be fair, I was most upset because there was an inconsistency. I was being singled out versus the others. I did wrong, and I respect in whichever environment I'm in.
Okay,
Catholic,
so how did you react?
Catholic, Christian, Islam, Jewish, whatever the rights, whatever the observations are. What did you say, Yapa? I'm sorry.
So what was your reaction? What did you do about it?
That I'm ashamed to say nothing. And
He put the pen down and just started thinking about his presentation. He said nothing.
Yeah, but I wanted to tell the rabbi later, I think you were wrong because of what other people were doing. I met him the irony is that maybe God wanted me to say something because the next day, this never happened before, I met him in the men's room of the synagogue. And so I said, oh, this is a perfect thing for me to say, Rabbi, just a little thing bugging me, and so on. But I said nothing. Okay, so that's just my thing about, it's about zealotry. It's about righteousness. It's about observing the code and the ethics and the morals of your fellows. And it's about halacha, Jewish law, which I deeply respect, even if I don't observe the particular law. And
But I think there's a difference between jealousy, a private jealousy, that is jealousy for the sake and for the goodness of people, of a crowd, of a community. There's a difference between person for one.
I'm glad you said that, because what I was looking for was there's a wonderful text. I think it's in Leviticus, but I couldn't find it. It's throughout Judaism, though, in Talmud and lots of works, that says nothing, not even halacha, not even for the sake of Jewish law, do you supersede embarrassment and humiliation. Do you overturn somebody's humanity and right not to be embarrassed and humiliated? And there are many stories like this. An Orthodox rabbi that I respect is not supposed to shake a woman's hand. Okay, that's a rule. It must be a rabbinic law of some kind. It's not a biblical law, right, Yaffa? Not supposed to take, but this rabbi's smart. He's not going to offend somebody coming into his shul. He decided, I'm going to shake the woman's hand. I'm not going to embarrass and humiliate her when she reaches out her hand. Some rabbis don't. So that's a positive on that rabbi's front. And I think I had another example. Yeah, Jonathan Sachs, who's one of my heroes, along with Happy, Yaffa, and Abba. Jonathan Sachs was once at a retreat. This was earlier on, before he had become famous. And they were studying under a rabbi, and they were in the shul with their talit and their prayer books, and praying in the shul. And a woman walked in with a talit. Women are supposed to be segregated and separated in shul from men, if they're at all, and they certainly are not to wear talises. The talit is only the privilege. This is what I mean. We have a long way to go, right, in our own religion. Women are not supposed to wear talit, and there's all sorts of conflicts over the kotel, the Western Wall, and women being there and praying and everything. But this is in a specific situation, and Jonathan Sachs's mates, all the other studying rabbis, go out of their mind, and they run to the rabbi who's in charge. What do we do? What do we do? And the rabbi says, you go back and you let the woman pray with you. What's wrong with you? Judaism never avows, never, ever, in the name of halacha, will embarrass or humiliate somebody in public or in private. And I couldn't find the text for it.
Yeah, the text is if you embarrass somebody, it's as if you read his face. It's as if you put blood on his face. That's the
yeah. There's something like that, right? It's definitely sinful. So anyway, so those are personal experiential moments. To what I was trying to do in this course was to make Torah a personal experiential story. So what I wanted to say was, Joshua will be a great leader. One thing that signals that very early on is he gets a name change. He's really called Hosea, Hosea. He gets the name Joshua, which means savior in part. And he gets
no. Can I explain it? His name is Hosea, and a Yud is added, Yoshua, and the Yud stands for God, godliness.
Right. And there's a savior in there somewhere. too, that he means salvation. He's going to be the savior of the Jewish people. He's going to get them into the promised land. But in any case, he got a name change. Whenever you get a name change in the Bible, I'll give you two other examples.
Abraham, Sarah.
Abraham becomes Abraham, the big one.
Sarah.
Jacob becomes Israel. Jacob's name is Israel. Israel means, by the way, God's wrestlers. That's what we're doing, all of us in this. We're wrestling with God and with these ideas, right? But the name change signifies a great difference. And I wanted to bring Susan in here because she underwent a name change. But I want to tell you, it's a big thing to have a name change in the Bible. And it was for Susan. Can you add to that, Susan? Here.
I went through quite a few years ago a reform conversion, and I had to pick out a Hebrew name. And at that point, I picked out Yeshara, meaning straight. Correct, Yafa?
What?
Yeshara, straight.
Yeshara, yes.
Yes.
But it's also honest.
Honest. I didn't know that, but thinking that it was straight, I felt that I was on the straight path to where I wanted to go. I lasted in the Reform branch several months, and then I decided on a modern Orthodox conversion. And for that name,
can I just interrupt and say, she went out of the Reform. The kicker was when she heard somebody say, at a lunch or something, we're Reformed, we can do whatever we want. And she said, this isn't for me, and that's not true. So anyway, go ahead.
That was part of my issue. So I'm going through this modern Orthodox conversion, and I needed to pick out a name. And at that point, Yeshara was not the one that I wanted. So I chose Sarah Ma'ayan, and Sarah looking at Sarah and her patience, her dignity. I thought, well, when I grow old, I'd like to be like her, a role model. And Ma'ayan, my understanding is that's a spring. And so,
Water spring, yes.
Pardon?
Yes, it's a natural water spring.
Natural water spring.
Yes.
Natural.
So you go to a natural spring to refresh yourself. And I thought of Torah as a place to go to refresh myself, to be born again, but for refreshing. So hence my official Hebrew name is Sarah Ma'ayan.
It's a yofi. Beautiful.
Thank you.
But Sarah also means princess, then you are.
Oh, you can remind Jonathan of that periodically.
And one more kicker on this is that, you know, a wife is a nurturer and takes care of a lot of the nurturing activities, and that's a wonderful thing. I'm not saying that as a chauvinistic statement, but Susan is also, a wife tends to be the person who determines religion and religious activities. Very, very much so. I think in all religion. Well, no, not in all religion. Well, what about Christianity and Catholicism?
No.
Yeah, because the wife doesn't the wife though somehow decide whether the husband's going to go to church and all of that?
No.
No, okay.
No.
So it's a particular Judaic thing then maybe, but I know it's not Islamic. So my wife, the reason we're having this class and that I'm here is because of Susan. Got my interest going in Torah, and at her conversion, and I had to convert too, and it was not easy. It took 2 years. Reform conversions are kind of take a hot minute, but her being a little unfair, but her conversion took 2 years, and quote unquote dragged me along. I was not going to stand. I had to have a legal marriage under Orthodox terms. I was not going to say no to that. even though I wasn't of that persuasion, so to speak, and wasn't
Getting married?
like that.
You weren't of the persuasion to get married?
No, of to have an halakhic marriage or to be orthodox.
Ah.
But I wasn't going to. I would have kept that from Susan. And by the way, she didn't do any of this because of me. Had nothing to do with me. Maybe subconsciously, but not openly. I didn't ask her to convert her. I mean, she loved my Jewish family and everything, but she decided on her own. And when I asked her why, she still doesn't exactly tell me why. But it's just something she felt she had to do. So anyway,
I want to tell you something, that Judaism was enriched by it.
go ahead.
What, Yafa?
Judaism was enriched by you joining us.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, that was
It was
nice.
enriched.
There you
Judaism was
go.
enriched.
And this course only exists because of Susan, who one day dragged me along, and now I come willingly. But she got me into Torah. And the last thing, just this is anticlimactic, but just this final slide that I have on the board, just to answer Yafa's question about and Yafa's complaint that her belief that Moses got a raw deal, and he was this amazing leader, taking people out of Egypt. Was he amazing leader? On the other end, there were some issues, perhaps. So here are some of the ways people talk about, if not Moses's failures, the questions they have about Moses's response. It's called adaptive challenges in leadership. Adaptive challenges is a term, I think, coined by a great sociologist or psychologist, I'm not sure which, named Ronald Heifetz. He uses this term adaptive challenge. And if you apply that to some of these incidents in Numbers, we're in Numbers now, this Parsha leading to the promised land, we're already out of Egypt. Moses' response to when the people complain about food in chapter 11 of Numbers is, I cannot carry all these people by myself, like I'm their mother, I think he says. The burden is too heavy for me. If this is how you are going to treat me, please go ahead and kill me if I have found favor in your eyes, and let me not see my own ruin. Then there's the spies' negative report. A chapter or two later, Moses and Aaron fall on their faces. I mean, they're pretty horrified. It's a negative report, but as a leader, do you fall on your face? I don't know. Another one, Israelites seek to make amends by engaging immediately in battle. That's the one we read. That was pretty terrible to say that was humorous, but they change from 1 second to the next. Moses warns against, but is not listened to. So is he losing leadership powers? Those who fight are defeated, destroyed utterly. Then there's the Korah rebellion, the man who wants to really take Moses' place. He says we're all holy in this congregation, but it's really a kind of hypocrisy because he really just wants power. And Moses prays for ground to open up and swallow the rebels. That should be their punishment. It's the only time, I think, Yafa, correct me if I'm wrong, that he asked God to punish somebody directly. So that's the thing here. Why should he do that? This does not end the rebellion, though. People continue to grumble and grumble. They want to go back to Egypt. They don't have water. They don't have manna. They don't have bread.
Okay. Korah's rebellion came just after the spies, purposely, because he knew the people were weak and everything.
Yeah, the people, it's all related. The people are pretty fed up and they're demoralized.
Okay, Jonathan, one more question. Okay, so why can he doesn't have to be the leader? Why can't he just come to the land?
Yeah.
Not be the leader, just be.
Okay, yeah. Why is he punished? He suffers I call it a quadruple whammy. One, he is going to die. Two, he is going to not go to the promised land. Three, he is not going to lead the people the rest of the way into the promised land. And the fourth, who knows the fourth? It's not a trick question, but people forget it.
What? What did I?
There's a fourth terrible quadruple whammy. He does not get to have his sons inherit his
But-
mantle.
Exactly. You don't
You-
hear about them.
Joshua does, but not Gershon. And who's the other son?
Doesn't hear about them. But you know what?
Gershon and-
According to the Midrash, evidently he wanted badly, and there's a story that he asked God, could you just make me like a bird that I could come and fly to the
Yeah. And in Deuteronomy, he mentions it again several
Right.
times. God, won't you
begged God. So he didn't take it so well, the punishment. Anyway, whatever.
He asked God to reconsider. Okay, so I don't exactly have an answer for you, but
Right.
he got to see the promised land from above. Is God's point that we need new leadership for a new time? So I'm passing the mantle on to Joshua. Maybe that's it. And we're at the end here. So my last thing that I didn't get to, I think I started to
the
say.
promised land.
No, I wanted to say that my course was trying to have you, that's why I brought in Susan and bring in my stories of,
Wonderful. Thank you so much. You really
well,
invested
the
so much
idea,
time into this. Oh my
well,
God.
the idea was that there's an experience, there's a lived experience that is to be had with, for me, for religion to be meaningful and for Torah to be meaningful. And it's a living work in how to behave and so on and so forth. I mean, it's not unique to religions in this way, but so I want to try to
Explain. Yeah.
and I didn't do that enough. I didn't let you give me your, for example, I was going to ask you today, do you have examples when you were humiliated or embarrassed that would go against Judaic thinking and Judaic thought for the sake of a law or a halacha?
Yeah.
But, these are personal things.
I got one.
Okay,
got
well,
one.
we'll
Something.
end the course with this. I know you guys have to take off. We're past 3:30, but take the last comment, Albert.
Okay, well, no, it was when I was in third grade. This was, 1958 or something. Yeah, 1958, third grade. And the teacher was this horrid woman. And so we're doing arithmetic or adding and subtracting something or other. And I managed to move everything over by one, and I got everything wrong. And I'm sitting there trying to erase it, and it's that weird paper from 1958. And I'm trying to erase it, and she comes walking down the aisle, and she was always doing this to everybody. I just didn't think I would be the next one in line. And she picks up my paper and shows it to the whole wide world and says, this girl, she didn't even say my name, this girl got a whole row wrong.
Aye.
And I thought, thank you for that. It was
That-
terrible. It really
I-
affected me. It destroyed my entire psyche for, 70 years, more or less.
I bet we all had that experience.
Yeah.
One way or another.
Yeah.
And maybe we had teachers who were good mentors along the way.
Yeah.
One
Oh,
that we can think of
absolutely.
at least.
Yeah,
But
that one was like,
yeah, that's
oh my
pretty terrible. Well, thank you. We'll all
Thank
keep
you,
in,
Jonathan.
we'll all keep in touch. Thank you.
Alba, nice
Yeah.
meeting you. Good seeing
Wait, did you
Yaffa.
guys get the
Happy?
fan yet? Did you get the fan?
No, not yet.
Well,
No,
Josh
and-
got the check and the mask, but you
Yeah,
guys didn't.
we haven't yet, but I know we will. And
You will.
and we have to send you a
What?
strong
Send me
box.
anything.
And
Oh,
Josh,
right, a
we're,
box, that's right.
there's Josh to say goodbye and to
Sure.
send
Hey,
us off.
Josh, bye, Josh. Josh,
Bye,
show everybody
everyone.
the mask. Show everybody the mask. Show everybody the mask.
Thank
Got
you
it right
so
here.
much for
It's
you.
beautiful. It's from Tu B'Shvat
This
this year.
is the mask that Alba
Yeah.
sent Josh.
Without you, forget about it. We wouldn't have anything.
See, that's our logo right there. The pomegranate with the crown on top and the 1, 2, 3, 5 and the 1, 2, 3, 5 and 18 little leaves. To the Shvat. There it is.
Beautiful.
Pretty cute.
Yes,
Nice.
wonderful,
Very cute.
wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Thank you through the mask.
And thank you, Josh. for
Okay.
taking a technophobe and a
And it can
technical
help.
idiot through things.
Got one other question
So
for you.
much.
Thanks,
Okay.
everybody.
Nice
Thanks,
meeting
everybody.
everybody.
Bye.